Shukran Afuneeb. You think you're in love, but there is another possibility darker and far more unsettling. You are being controlled. Not by the person you're drawn to, but by the wounds you've never dared to face. In that instant when your heart races, your eyes lock onto someone with unshakable fascination, a door opens. Not to love, but to the shadow, that unconscious part of you long exiled from awareness. People call it chemistry. I call it the unconscious. And unless you've looked into the mirror of your soul, you may have never truly chosen a partner in your life. You've only repeated reenacting an old script written by pain. Classical psychoanalysis spoke of sexual attraction as a matter of biology, a game of hormones and instinct. But Jung saw deeper. To him, that overwhelming pull is not merely life's exuberance, it's the soul's cry for wholeness. A forgotten part of us, wounded, repressed, denied, suddenly awakens in the image of another, and we call it love. But often it is simply a longing for our lost self. Recall the last time you were drawn to someone beyond reason. Maybe it was their eyes, their voice, a passing touch that lingers in your mind. You thought it was desire, but pause and ask, what am I truly yearning for? You may find yourself speechless, because what you seek is not in them, it lies buried in you. Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. So when you don't understand why you keep falling for the same type again and again, it's not destiny choosing for you. It is your shadow saying, see me. So what truly happens when we're magnetized by someone, could it be that we're not falling in love with them, but being lured by a forgotten part of our own soul? Here's a secret in depth psychology no one tells you. You're not attracted to the one who's best for you. You're drawn to the one who reflects your wound, whether you realize it or not. That's why relationships repeat. Different people, same feelings, hurt, hope, disappointment, because somewhere deep in your psyche, a story remains unfinished. And you unconsciously cast someone to play the same role again, not to heal, but to hurt anew. But this means something profound. The relationships that wound us most might hold the deepest keys to our healing if we dare to pause and look within. When a woman uses seduction to captivate and control, perhaps she is grappling with a part of herself long rejected. When a man keeps loving those who don't love him, perhaps he is still trying to win over a memory, a mother who never embraced him with a warm heart. Love without awareness becomes a stage for our shadows to reenact old tragedies. But if you dare to ask, whom am I really loving, this person, or the part of me I've never met, then the true journey begins. And that's what we will explore next, Anima. Animus, who is the invisible lover in your soul, will illuminate how the image of our ideal partner is shaped by the unconscious, why it holds such magnetic power, and how to distinguish true love from projection. Are you ready? Because this journey may not just transform the way you love, it might awaken your very soul. Comment below, I was once drawn to someone I knew wasn't good for me, and share what that felt like. You might find you're not alone. Don't forget to follow, because the next episode could be the turning point in understanding and healing your own heart. But the real question is, why was I drawn to them in the first place? Carl Jung doesn't answer like a conventional psychologist. He takes us deeper to where emotions are not just feelings, but messages from the unconscious. At that level, attraction isn't random. It's the reflection of an inner image, one you've never allowed yourself to fully live out. Let's begin with a concept Jung called anima and animus, two inner archetypes representing the soul's opposite to our biological gender. If you're a man, the anima is the inner image of the ideal woman. If you're a woman, the animus is the inner image of the ideal man. But these images are not crafted by conscious choice. They're formed from memories, wounds, desires, and even from experiences you've never lived but deeply needed. For example, a man raised by a cold, distant mother may carry an anima starved of warmth and finds himself magnetically drawn to similarly distant women. Not because they're his type, but because buried within them lies a question that still aches within him. Could mother have loved me? And so he repeats the pattern, falling, hurting, trying to change her, not realizing he's trying to rewrite the past. Jung called this projection, when unseen parts of your soul are cast onto others. You're not really in love with them. You're in love with a forgotten part of yourself, a part you lost, buried, denied, and that's why you can't let them go. Not because they're special, but because they make you feel like you've come home. But beware, that sense of coming home isn't always love. Sometimes it's the familiarity of pain. Many say, I keep falling for the wrong person. No, you're falling for the right person, for your shadow, but the wrong one for your evolved soul. Now think back to someone you couldn't resist. Maybe you knew they weren't good for you, yet you felt pulled to them like an addiction. They hurt you, made you cry, even made you lose yourself, but you couldn't walk away. Why? Because you weren't in love with them. You were in love with the feeling of being seen, the illusion of finally being touched, where you've long been hidden. And when they left, it wasn't just your heart that shattered. It was the illusion that you had finally become whole. Here, Jung doesn't judge you. He invites you into something sacred, a return to your true self. Not to stop loving, but to love consciously. Because until you reconcile with your anima or animus, you will keep loving from a place of emptiness. Loving to fill a void. Loving to prove you're worthy. Loving to feel in control. And love like that, no matter how passionate, always ends in ruin. Jung believed that only when you integrate the inner image with consciousness, when you finally understand what you truly long for, only then can you choose a partner with clarity. No longer chasing the old projections. No longer blinded by intense chemistry, but guided by a deep inner peace, the kind of love that doesn't make you anxious. It makes you feel at home within yourself. In the tragedy, most people never ask this question. They fall, they hurt, they try again and call it fate. But as Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. If this resonates with you, know this, you are not alone. We are building a community of seekers, those who are ready to look inward. Not to avoid love, but to love wisely. Share your story in the comments. Who were you drawn to? What part of your shadow may have chosen them? Or simply write, I am awakening. Let others know they're not alone. Because when we speak it aloud, the shadow loses its grip. And when someone listens, the healing begins. In the next part, we'll go even deeper. Why are some people so irresistibly magnetic, so much that we lose our reason? We'll decode the psychology behind love addiction, sexual obsession, and why we crave those who hurt us most. You won't want to miss it, because that may be the moment you finally break free from the cycle of wrong, love heartbreak, and repetition. Are you ready? Why is it that the one who hurts you the most is often the one you can't seem to forget? If this question strikes a nerve, you're not alone. You've just touched one of the deepest psychological mechanisms. Jung ever revealed the compulsion to repeat, the unconscious drive to relive old wounds. Imagine a woman. She's intelligent, independent, successful. But every time she falls in love, she finds herself drawn to emotionally unavailable men, cold, vague, disappearing. She knows it. She could sit across from you and say, I know he's not good for me. But then he texts, what are you doing right now? And her heart trembles as if love just knocked on the door. The problem isn't awareness. The problem is the unconscious. Jung pointed out, when emotions become overwhelming beyond reason, that is always a signal that something unhealed is rising from within. You're not in love with them. You're trying to complete a story that never had an ending. And that person unknowingly has stepped into a role from your past. It could be your mother, your father, a person who betrayed you, someone who never chose you, or worse, it could be the echo of your own fear of abandonment, seeking someone to confirm your worth. Jung didn't say this to blame you, but to help you see yourself more clearly. Because if you don't recognize the unconscious loop, you'll keep running the same maze, never finding the exit. Imagine it like this. Deep inside every one of us, there is a blueprint of emotional experience, a pattern we're familiar with. For some, that pattern is love and neglect, or intimacy then abandonment, or desiring those we can't truly have. But why do those painful dynamics feel so familiar, so attractive? They become our type because they echo our earliest experiences of love. Whether that was love for a parent or for the first person who broke your heart. That's why when someone enters your life and stirs that same emotional frequency, you don't need time to fall. All it takes is a glance, a message, a single moment that awakens a memory buried deep. And that's why you say, I feel like I've known them forever. It's not a past life. It's this life just from when you were small. You're not in love with who they are now. You're in love with an old emotion, hoping that this time it'll lead to healing. But if you don't change the pattern within, you'll only relive the same pain, just with a new face. Pause and ask yourself, what is the most familiar emotional theme in my love life? Am I drawn to people who make me feel forgotten, Am I mistaking emotional chaos for emotional depth? Because real love doesn't make you guess. It doesn't ask you to lose yourself just to stay. It doesn't leave you staring at a read message at 2 a.m., wondering why silence hurts more than words ever could. If you're caught in these patterns, don't judge yourself. You're not weak. You're simply searching for healing in the only way your unconscious knows how. But the good news is you can change that pattern. You can learn to recognize when you're falling for your shadow. And from there, you can learn to love without having to suffer each time you do. Have you ever loved someone so much you lost yourself? Have you gone back to someone even knowing they'd hurt you again? Share your story in the comments, not to vent, but to free yourself. Sometimes just speaking it is enough to strip the shadow of its power. And we, this community of healing, we're here to witness you. In the next episode, we'll dive deeper. How the shadow chooses who we love, how it transforms us into someone we're not, and why, if left unchecked, it can destroy not only the love we crave, but the very self we're trying to protect. You won't want to miss it, because that might be the moment you realize real love begins the day you stop using others to heal your pain. If you're awakening, comment, "I've seen my pattern," and share this video with someone stuck in a painful loop. This might be the doorway they've been searching for. They didn't hurt you. Your shadow did. Let that echo in your heart for a moment. Maybe you've believed you were just a victim of love, that you simply fell for the wrong person. But if Carl Jung were sitting across from you, he would gently say you didn't love the wrong person. You loved the right shadow. The shadow Jung's shadow isn't evil. It isn't bad. It's simply the part of you you've never had the courage to face, the emotions you were taught to hide, the desires you suppressed for fear of rejection, the anger, sadness, weakness you swallowed in order to be seen as good. Jung defined the shadow as everything the ego refuses to acknowledge about itself. In other words, it's still you, just the version left in the dark. And the strange truth, the person you feel the strongest pull toward often embodies that exact shadow. If you've repressed your anger, you'll be drawn to someone fiery, unapologetically bold. If you've denied your need for control, you'll be seduced by someone who takes up all the space in your mind. If you've never dared to be fully yourself, you'll fall for someone who lives the way you wish you could. That's not love, that's projection. You're not in love with them. You're seeing a part of yourself in their form, and you believe if I'm with them, I'll finally be whole. But here's the hard truth. You can't integrate with yourself through someone else. And when you try, the relationship becomes a battleground. Because the shadow, when not integrated, becomes fire. You start controlling, obsessing, fearing their loss, as if losing them means losing yourself. And then they leave. Not because they're cruel, but because they can no longer be the mirror for your unhealed pieces. One of the clearest signs of projection in relationships is emotional polarization. On one hand, you idolize them. No one has ever made me feel this way. On the other, you panic. What if they leave me? You swing between devotion and dread and call it passion. But Jung would say no, that is your shadow surfacing. And until you recognize and integrate your shadow, it will keep choosing who you love. So how can you tell if you're loving through shadow rather than through awareness? Ask yourself, do I feel smaller in their presence? Am I trying to become someone they'll love? Do I panic when they don't text back? Much so, do I feel like my very existence depends on them? If the answer is yes, then perhaps you're not truly loving. You're clinging to a mirror, terrified it might shatter, because you're afraid that without it, you won't see yourself anymore. This is what Jung tried to teach us. Love is not about finding someone to complete you. It's about finding the broken places within and mending them yourself. Only then can love become freedom, not a chain. Have you ever felt like you became someone else just to be loved? Have you ever lost your boundaries to keep a relationship from falling apart? Share your experience in the comments. Not for sympathy, but for release. Because when we speak it, the shadow loses power. And when someone replies, "I've been there too," you realize you're not alone. In the next episode, we'll go deeper into this question. Why are we drawn to people who can hurt us? And more importantly, how do we break free from the cycle of intense but unhealthy love? We'll explore the neurobiology of emotional addiction and why your nervous system may be wired to mistake anxiety for love. Are you ready for that truth? If you're learning to love from the light, comment, "I'm learning to love from the light." And share this video with someone who's trapped in painful love. This might just be the map they've been waiting for. You didn't fall for the wrong person. Your nervous system simply never learned what safe love feels like. Pause for a moment. Take a breath, because that single truth could collapse a lifetime of assumptions. Many people think something is wrong with them in love. They wonder why they keep choosing the wrong ones, why they bond so deeply with those who hurt them, why their heart doesn't respond to the one who treats them well. Carl Jung may not have used modern terms like nervous system or avoidant attachment, but he understood this more deeply than anyone. He once wrote, "We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And one of the deepest shadows we carry into love is the entanglement between pain and aliveness. Have you ever felt breathless, missing someone who wasn't good for you? Have you ever been irresistibly drawn to someone who made you feel small, controlled, or constantly anxious? If yeah, you're not alone. You're not facing a problem. You're facing a pattern. Jung believed much of our emotional behavior is not governed by logic, but by emotional memories deeply stored in the unconscious. In simpler terms, you don't choose who you love. Your pain chooses for you. And one of its favorite choices, someone who reminds you of the original wound in the hope that this time you can fix it. Imagine you grew up where love came with conditions. You had to be good to be hugged. You had to please someone to be praised. You learned to shrink yourself just to be seen. Love for you became entangled with anxiety, uncertainty, and a constant need to be worthy. So as an adult, when you meet someone who makes you feel unsafe, you label it love. Not because it's good for you, but because it's familiar. This is dangerous, because now you can't tell the difference between love and a trauma loop. You confuse emotional safety with boredom. You don't know how to separate peace from numbness. And when someone loves you with steadiness, without triggering your insecurity, you feel uninterested, because your nervous system has been trained to confuse activation with affection. That's the cycle. You're not addicted to them. You're addicted to the feeling of trying to be chosen, of trying to earn love you once were denied. That person, whether they know it or not, has become a gateway to an old wound you're trying to rewrite. You're not loving them. You're fighting for a different ending to your past. Ask yourself, do I equate love with anxiety? Do I feel excited only when I have to win someone over? Do I lose interest when someone genuinely loves me? If yes, then you're not loving. You're being led by an old emotional script. Jung believed you can't truly love until you know who you are and which part of you is making the choice. So healing doesn't begin with finding the right person. It begins with disconnecting love from pain. Comment, "I'm learning how to love again." This isn't a journey you have to walk alone. We're building a community for those whose hearts once got lost and are now waking up. When you share, you're not weak. You're simply brave enough to stop letting the shadow lead your life. In the next episode, we'll go deeper. How do you transform emotional attachment into inner freedom? How do you stop being drawn to the wrong people and start attracting those aligned with your growth? You've learned about the shadow. Now it's time to learn how to live in the light without rejecting any part of yourself. If you're ready to continue this journey, comment, "I'm ready to step into the light," and share this video with someone someone who's using love as a way to escape pain. Help them begin their awakening. When you stop clinging to others to heal, you begin the journey back to yourself. There is a kind of pain that has no name, but anyone who's ever loved the wrong person has felt it. It's the emptiness that follows their departure, not just the loss of someone, but the collapse of the feeling that you were worthy only because you were loved. Carl Jung called this a split between the ego and the soul. You're not grieving their absence alone. You're grieving the part of your shadow that tied your aliveness to an illusion, and now that illusion has fallen apart. Have you ever woken up, looked in the mirror, and not recognized who you are? Not because your face changed, but because your heart has been hanging on someone else's wall for far too long. That's when the shadow whispers, "It's time to come home." And that moment is the beginning of individuation, Jung's word for the sacred process of returning to wholeness. Individuation isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. It doesn't begin with, "How do I get them back?" It begins with, "What part of myself did I abandon to be loved like that?" Jung believed that deep within us lies a center of the self, a place where ego doesn't need to perform, where light and shadow merge as one. But to reach it, you must reclaim what you've projected outward. You must look at the person who once mesmerized you and ask, what part of me did they symbolize that I never dared to live with? That's when the ego begins to return to itself. You stop blaming them for not choosing you and start seeing that you hadn't chosen yourself first. Maybe you gave away your softness to gain their attention. Maybe you silenced your intuition out of fear of being alone. Maybe you bent yourself into the perfect woman or the ideal man just to hold on to a love that was only half there. You don't need to do that anymore. Carl Jung said psychology begins not with advice, but with the observation of oneself as a phenomenon. So start, no rush, no judgment. When a feeling rises, ask yourself, is this a new emotion or an old memory? Am I reacting to the present or reliving the past? Do I love them or do I love the version of myself I hoped I could be? These are the questions that guide you out of the maze. And one day you won't feel pulled toward painful love anymore. Not because you become tougher, but because you finally see yourself clearly. Have you ever looked back and realized you lost yourself in love? Are you learning piece by piece how to return to yourself? Share your story in the comments. Tell us how you've grown or what your pain is teaching you now. Let this space be a home where we learn to love, not from clinging, but from coming home. In the next part, we'll enter a chapter you might need the most. How do we build love that isn't shaped by the shadow? A love not driven by fear, not fed by emptiness, but formed by two people who have each chosen themselves first. Jung called this the love after individuation, where union is no longer a collision of wounds, but a resonance between two awakened souls. If you've begun the work of reclaiming your shadow, comment, I'm coming back to myself. And share this video with someone you once watched lose themselves in love, because sometimes a gentle reminder is all it takes to change a life. There's a truth no one tells you: real love doesn't make you tremble. It helps you breathe. There are no mind games, no sleepless nights wondering, do they really love me? No gripping fear that if I lose them, I'll fall apart. Instead, there is ease, there is return, there is wholeness. Have you heard this line before? True love doesn't arrive with a thunderbolt, but with the quiet stillness of a heart that no longer fears. And Jung, though he spoke of the unconscious, the shadow, and the fragmentation of the self, once said, only in the fullness of one's own being can we truly see another. So what waits for you on the other side of all the shadow work? Of the unraveling of mistaken attraction, of seeing the patterns you kept replaying? Not a new lover, a new you. A you who is no longer ruled by emotional hunger. A you who no longer offers love as a negotiation. A you who doesn't love to be filled, but loves to resonate. This kind of love begins quietly. It doesn't sparkle. It doesn't shout. Because it doesn't come from where you are lacking, it comes from where you are full. You meet someone, and you feel no need to prove, to perform, or to chase. You're not the perfect version of yourself, but you are yourself. And they don't make your pulse race out of anxiety. They make you feel safe. Now, if you've been hurt before, this feeling might seem strange or even boring because you've been conditioned to equate love with storms. You're used to manipulation, to running after, to thinking that love means uncertainty. So when peace arrives, your nervous system might resist it. And Jung warned us, what is rejected by the unconscious returns as fate. So if you've ever walked away from a healthy relationship, if you've felt bored with someone who treated you kindly, pause and ask yourself, am I running from love or from the stability I've never learned to stay with? That is the final lesson. Love isn't a place you run to for rescue. It's a space you walk into when you've already rescued yourself. And when two people arrive, each having stepped out of their own shadow, no longer carrying the weight of old emotional baggage, no longer asking the other to make me feel worthy, then love becomes a journey, not a transaction. Have you ever met someone who made you feel peace, and yet you doubted it? Are you learning to distinguish between chemistry and compatibility? Share your story or questions in the comments below. This isn't just a space for listening, it's a space for healing, sharing, and connecting with others who are ready to love without fear. And if you've made it to this part of the video, pause and acknowledge something sacred. You've made it through the shadow. You've learned how not to be ruled by it, and that is something profoundly beautiful. In the final part of our journey, we'll enter into a sacred closure. How do you consciously choose to love? What are the signs that you're ready to love, not from trauma, but from freedom? We'll explore that divine moment when you are no longer just someone's lover, but a creator of loving space. Comment, I'm ready to love with awareness. Share this video with someone who's on a similar path or someone still caught in the loop of old emotional patterns. Let this be our shared journey. No one has to walk it alone. And then you realize love isn't a destination. It's a mirror reflecting the deepest parts of your soul. You've made it to the end of the journey, a voyage through the quiet corridors of the psyche where the shadow stops whispering and the light begins to speak. You've heard the metaphors of desire. You've sat with reflections on the shadow. You've looked into the face of emotional addiction disguised as love. You didn't come here out of curiosity. You came because deep down something within you is shifting. Maybe it's a relationship you can't let go of. Maybe it's a feeling you've never been able to name, but that shows up in every love story you live. Or maybe you're just finally ready to wake up. Carl Jung didn't write about psychology as theory. He wrote as someone who had been lost and found his way back. He didn't leave us a path to follow. He left a map so that we could draw our own. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So now that you've touched the light of awareness, the final question isn't, who am I in love with? It is, where in myself is this love coming from? You don't need to rush to fix anything. You don't need to prove you're worthy. You only need to stay with yourself. Listen, be honest, be gentle. And little by little, you'll notice. The old relationships no longer shake you. The old patterns no longer confuse you. And love, when it comes, will be the fruit of growth, not the echo of lack. What part of this video spoke to you the most? Have you ever loved from the shadow, and what did it teach you? Share your reflections in the comments below. We don't have to be strong alone, but we do have to be honest together. Your story might be the light someone else is waiting for. If this journey spoke to you, consider subscribing. Not to follow me, but to make a quiet promise to yourself that you'll keep awakening, keep exploring, and keep walking toward the most important meeting of your life, the meeting with yourself. And if this video reminds you of someone loving wrong, hurting deeply, and not knowing why, send it to them. Because you never know. A single video might not change a life, but it can open a door. And sometimes that door is where freedom begins. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for being brave enough to look within. See you in the next video, where we'll continue decoding the soul with the light of truth and the courage of the heart. Don't love because you're lonely. Love when you're fully present, so you won't turn someone else into your salvation. To you, the one learning to love without losing yourself, you're already on the right path.